Yeah. What's up, webinar people?
Hello.
I'm so ready for this, Owen.
I'm getting a bit cranked up as well, Jim. Getting a little bit cranked up. It's what time is it? It's 4 o'clock on a Thursday. It's time to crank up the shizzle.
Here in California, it's 8 a.m. and we're ready for the shizzle as well, Owen. Owen, I got to tell you, I just got back from NDC, Portugal. I was giving a talk and training out there. And
how'd that go?
I got the COVID on the way back. So I'm sick, medicated, and cranky. But that's appropriate because we're going to talk about DevOps. You gotta smack DevOps around a little bit. So this is
you do. You got to smack DevOps. You got to smack a lot of stuff around when it comes to best practices. Particularly DevOps.
I want to smack DevOps right in the scanner. I want to make sure that all of these things that the DevOps high priests and priestesses are telling us, I want to get a little reality into it because a lot of people are telling us DevOps it's going to solve all our AppSec problems.
Sure it is.
Yeah, sure it is. And of course, it's got its limits like anything else in our industry.
Yeah. Anyways. Yeah. Well, there's trade-off. It's like this idea where why do you have brakes? Well, because they make me go faster. So we have to look at it from that perspective. It's not speed is cool, but if the output of the sausage machine, the output is crappy code and insecure applications, you can have all the speed you want. It ain't going to help your business. So
I agree. Hey, you and I were coders in like the 90s and 2000s, if I remember correctly. Yeah. How much they were all about speed and maybe we got accuracy and quality and things like that. And we're paying the price for that era still in this day.
Oh yeah, we're paying the price for developers being taught insecure coding practices from some of the biggest companies in the planet. Yeah.
Let's get next slide, please. Next slide. Let's get. We're in the webinar.
Next
slide. Yeah. My name is Jim Manico. I'm the founder of Manicode and an old friend and partner of EdgeScan. I'm happy to be here on this webinar. I'm primarily an educator. I teach developers about secure coding. Owen's been an educator a lot of his life as well. Owen, why don't you introduce yourself? You're a CEO now. You got a suit. Yeah. Oh my God, Owen.
Yeah.
Owen, come on.
Suits. I know. You know what? We should change that picture. I've actually got a Hawaiian shirt from. I spent my honeymoon in Kauai, and I still got the Hawaiian shirt, but I'm not allowed to wear it because it's a bit small for me now. But I'm the CEO of EdgeScan, which is a full stack vulnerability intelligence SaaS. Covers, it plugs into DevOps, believe it or not. But I think there could be some self-deprecating conversations here in terms of the value of DevOps and but also there's good as well. There's some good stuff as well. But yeah, that's what I do for a living. I try to do my CEOing with EdgeScan.
I know you and I were talking about AppSec. I really like about 20 years ago was when we first started having our original conversation. So that's why one of the reasons I'm so happy to jump on your webinar with you, endorse the work of EdgeScan and the work that you're doing, because I know you've been both a professional in the AppSec world, in the developer world, but also as a businessman for like 20 years. So I'm really fond of what you've done with EdgeScan. And Owen, I'm super happy to be here with you to talk about DevOps today.
Yeah. Jim, there's something that I think we both have in common is we don't treat what we do as a job. It's something we do. It defines us in some minor extent. So I think it's really good to be able to share, in part, our combined, say, 45, 50 years of knowledge combined. Our mind to sort of mind share this stuff. And I think this is our third one we've done. Yeah. And look, I like this. For me, it's not going to be death by PowerPoint. You can play around and talk about stuff. It's all good.
Let's do this.
Yeah, let's go.
Let's go. Give us some slides. Next slide, please. Next slide. So this is a good question. I want to make a note here. From Manicode, these slides were authored by Jimmy Mesta from a company called KSOC. He's a Kubernetes guy, right? KSOC. And we're using these slides with permission for Jimmy Mesta, who's been my mentor in the world of DevOps. I just want to make a quick acknowledgement to thank him for letting us use some of this material. So
100%.
What is DevOps? Next slide, please. Now, what's important about Gene Kim and his early research with Nicole Ferguson and Jez Humble is we have all these ideas about DevOps, but now we have someone doing a real scientific study to understand the impact of this method of doing software development. Next slide, please. Let's jump to the next slide. And go to and the thing that we're going to focus in on is security test automation, but there are, of course, a lot of other pieces to DevOps. I think where DevOps is really hot, Owen, is where as a developer, I'm able to deliver code. I'm able to deliver. Let me try this again. I'm able to deliver code live like almost instantaneously when I'm playing well with the pipeline. And so,
yeah, I agree. You know, I think we could do it quicker. And you would like to think if DevSecOps is done in a reasonable manner, that a lot of the low-hanging fruit in terms of, you know, some of the stuff a typical scanner would pick up should be picked up before it comes out the other side of the machine. So yeah.
When I'm looking at a DevOps lifecycle, I'm with you, Owen. I look for two things. Does the security testing have a variety of scanning tools in play? And if I try to check in code, if I issue a PR, am I blocked from merging until I actually pass the security testing? That's really important to me in DevOps world. That's when you're really turning the switch on and you're serious about DevOps, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that. Because, you know, throwing tools at stuff might sound like a great idea. There's a few things there. Tools some tools look for the same things in different ways. And if there's no standard or sort of set taxonomy of what we're looking for in our DevOps pipeline, and there's no sort of, you know, standardized risk model, sometimes you'll get build failures for no reason or for little reason, because some tools will highlight something as a high risk, other tools will do it differently. So for me, something that's really important, and I think I'd like to hear what you think about it. Maybe we're jumping ahead as well, but it's about tuning tools, tuning stuff. You know, not looking for everything. Let's look for some of the critical things that are embarrassing if they are found on your public facing web application. You know, let's try and remove the chance of those issues going into a production system using automation. I think that's a good start.
I think it's a powerful start, especially when you're using a combination of static analysis and third-party library scanning.
Sure.
And you're doing the full gambit of what security scanning tools are out there. And it's a blocker preventing me from completing my work as developer. It's hard to tune that so it's robust, but it's a powerful thing. And I'd say the second thing I look at in a DevOps pipeline is am I able to push code live instantly if I pass the gauntlet of tests? If you look at the next slide, let's go next slide, sir. Next slide. If you look at the next slide, you'll see that when you are embracing those critical aspects of DevOps, the difference in how you perform as a software shop is radical. This is statistics from Gene Kim and Nicole Ferguson and all the other folks from the Accelerate book. 46 times more frequent code deployments, 440 times faster from commit to going live, 170 faster mean time to recover from downtime, and lower change failure rate, because you're so used to doing so much change, you get better at it. So this is where it gets exciting. And we're not talking security yet, but we will.
Yeah.
Excuse me, that's a COVID. But look at this. Look at the power here of really embracing the key aspects of DevOps. You're more innovative. You're able to compete in a way that non-DevOps shops can't even get close to. So that's why this is hot right now.
Well, it's also the way the world works, right? Like if you're a product, we've got a product, we're deploying new features in an incremental fashion. The idea is you deploy a minimal viable product to solve a problem, to add some value to your client's journey. Because what we're talking about here ultimately is how do we build product, right? And how do we do it in an efficient way? And then if you move ahead from that, you're saying, well, if you incrementally deploy product, which is a big part of DevOps, I think it's important to, it's important to, the old way is to, in effect, waterfall, massive monolithic commitments. DevOps, where we can commit small things really quick. The lead time from commit to deploy is quicker. And if we're committing smaller things more frequently, hopefully, because the delta or the change isn't as big, we may pick up on the vulnerabilities as well, because we're not looking at a massive monolith anymore. We're looking at smaller incremental changes.
I think a lot of DevOps speakers don't talk about that. You hit a really important point, is that when we're checking code into a Scrum sprint or even waterfall, I'm checking in complete features that are ready to go live. When I'm checking into a DevOps lifecycle, it's minimal, as small a possible change as possible. So the scanning technology can assess it. The less code they got to assess, the better. So I think that culture change is super critical in DevOps of how we change functionality. Next slide.
Yeah, culture, man. Let's talk about culture.
Yeah, next slide. Yeah, we don't want to. Yeah, there we go. Let's look at some anti-patterns that DevOps is trying to address. And this is how I wrote code for 20 years, where I'd write the code, try to make it secure, make it quality, and then operations would deploy it. And the classic thing, it's like, hey, it worked on my laptop. It worked on my dev server. I don't know what happened to you deployment guys. And this stopped working a long time ago.
No, I agree. Like what we have here is, we have people in development, we have people of operations, you have ton of tooling in each. And also you get this idea of things being lost in translation. People are in silos, they're not working together. They're working as toll gates along a serial path of data, which is sort of what DevOps ain't. So yeah.
Next slide. We know we want to stop doing this. A DevOps team silo. You know what, Owen?
Silo.
A lot of people complain about this, but I got to tell you, this isn't always a bad idea. I mean, this, where it's a separate silo, it's a bad idea. But DevOps as a service ain't so bad. But I agree. What the point of this slide is, if your DevOps team is working independently of the devs and working independently of operations, we're missing the point here. Now you're just an admin with a special title. You're not doing DevOps. So we don't like this. We don't like this.
No, well, we need to move closer to the fluffy cloud. That ain't it.
Next slide. Next slide. And this is a little bit better, but this is where we have a DevOps group that's developer centric, working with devs, but really is not addressing the operational needs properly. And I still have dedicated resources doing traditional operations. I haven't fully embraced DevOps yet. I'm a little bit of the way there. This is not it either. Next slide. Get me out of here.
Yeah, let's move on.
I think the other thing is DevOps is not like a glorified admin. It's a much bigger culture change, as you were alluding to earlier.
Yep.
Next slide. Yeah, here we go. This is my whole career, Owen. This is my whole career.
Yeah.
Worked on my laptop. Everything was fine. I don't know why your production server is on fire. It's ops problem now. And this stopped working a long time ago. I love this slide, by the way. Look at that girl. She's like, worked on my laptop. Don't blame me.
Yeah. Told you so.
This is where we're going. We love collaboration. This is getting closer to DevOps, where you have a lot of professionals that are dealing with development and operations together in harmony. This is like, I got infrastructure as code. I'm doing a lot of configuration for my infrastructure. It's dev tasks, and we're starting to collaborate. We still have professionals dedicated to just ops or just dev, but there's a lot of collaboration on a daily basis. We're getting better here. Next slide. This is the dream. I don't see anyone getting to this. You still have specialists, but that's what we're trying to do, where you have one team of code-centric dev and operations all working together to build automation. I like this. Next slide.
It's good.
Now, a lot of people don't like this concept, but I got to tell you, think about it. One of your big customers, Owen, think about like, I'm doing thousands of apps and I have hundreds, if not thousands of teams. I don't want to duplicate DevOps work across all my teams. So I like having a service provider that has a DevOps pipeline that can be radically customized on a team by team basis. So they become, and I think this is the future of AppSec in general, where we're service providers providing tools and resources to enable development.
I think that's so true. Like we're a means to an end. We're not the end itself. And I think when you're doing this stuff for as long as you and I, have been doing, and maybe some people are quicker learners than us, but the idea would be is, security is not the be all and end all. That's why, there is a reluctance culturally to invest heavily into security because they're saying, what's the output? And then you talk about, well, if you get a breach, that'll cost you a lot of money. And they'll say, well, we haven't had a breach yet. And then you go, well, okay, well let's talk about, So it's, I think we're certainly, we're a catalyst and an enabler, as opposed to the ultimate goal is not to have secure products. The ultimate goal is to have products that's secure, if you know what I mean.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
Next slide. So let's define DevOps, right? There's a process component, culture. There's a people component. We're changing how our teams are organized and how we address software. And it's automation. A lot of people don't like to equate DevOps with CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous deployment. But that's the heart of what DevOps is. It's the tools we use. Without any piece of this, we're not really doing DevOps. So I
agree. Totally. And people is a cultural, and that's why I think some people have problems with DevOps is it's not sort of a thing you can touch and feel. It's a way of doing things. And it's a way of aligning technology and people and culture and responsibility and who owns what, like, who owns this, who's responsible for X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And, if you're doing it a different way and you try to implement this, you might get halfway there. You might wind up one of those sort of Venn diagrams we showed already. But it can be difficult to move into this, a DevOps nirvana, Jim.
I love it. Next slide.
Yep. So
these are some just high level concepts around DevOps. Let's go next slide and dig into some other deeper details for a second. So this is a little more of the heart of what DevOps is about, right? Automating the building, testing, deploying, and monitoring of all parts of the software development lifecycle. Etsy, Zane Lackey, Nick Galbraith, Gene Kim are some of the innovators in this area. And we saw Etsy able to innovate beyond their competitors because of these methodologies, right? So as a developer, I can literally check in a piece of code and watch it go live immediately because of this automated development infrastructure in place, including security testing.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things there before we move on. I don't know if we're going to hit on them. The automating, monitoring, alerting, super important. Visibility, super important. Tuning tools, important. Let's not look for every type of vulnerability possible. Let's look for maybe a certain type of vulnerability, like say critical risk issues, in a particular part of your stack initially, and then you can sort of turn the screws down a bit more as you get comfortable and that type of thing. And automation is great at scale, at volume, and at repeatable tasks. But when you get into things like biz logic, complex stuff, access control, stuff, sensitive areas, as you call them here, Jim, that's where the sort of the wheels in a way start to fall off DevOps in terms of automation ain't so good at fixing that stuff.
This is fantastic. And I think the key here as well is that when you're looking at a pure tool-based pipeline, going to fail to find these things, the access control, and these are like OWASP top 10 right now. This is why I like EdgeScan's business model, right? You have a large team of researchers doing pen testing manually, aided by automation to have it scale well. And that's necessary. That's not a nice to have. That's critical to address the sensitive areas. And so when you're building an AppSec program and you're only using automation, that's a highly limited approach. And I think this is where the wheels of DevOps falls off, as you were saying, Owen. Bring it up.
So yes, that's a really good point, Jim. Like, we're doing tons of ML research, but we're finding it more applicable to things like threat intel and vulnerability mapping and and like trying to figure out which prioritize our risk-based prioritization and stuff, or and we have some features in that space that in EdgeCon currently we've much more to do, but the old chestnut of the idea of getting automation to be intelligent like a human and to understand risk like a human, we're so far from there. So it's it is, we need to understand what DevOps can do well, and then not be sort of worshiping any fake DevOps deities, in terms of that they can do everything if you do it properly, because it can't.
I've seen some people do things like, I'm going to use significant automation for all the technical vulns and hire a pen tester just for access control because it's so critical. And I like those kind of strategies to do this.
That's what we do in EdgeCon. Our advanced license is a penetration testing as a service license, which tons of tech, tons of automation, on demand, continuous, ASM, etc., full stack, the whole thing, looking for things on a continuous basis, exposures, protocols, ports, all the injection stuff. But in terms of business logic, in terms of authorization, in terms of access control, or complex transitions within the application that may give rise to fraud or something, the idea, we're very honest with our clients and we say you need to get a pen testing as a service for that. So automation for all the technical vulnerabilities, but for the more flavorsome, logical and contextual vulnerabilities, we still believe that you'll need a human to weed that stuff out. And just to finish that off, like, what we're doing is we're competing with determined attackers, which are humans. Most determined attackers aren't using EdgeScan, Tenable, Nessus, Zap, whatever, and they're just wildly scanning sites to find vulnerabilities, because that's really noisy. It's a real noisy thing to do if you want to keep under the radar. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but in terms of professional cyber criminals, if you think about it, we're trying to fight against professional cyber criminals. We're trying to protect our businesses against people with a malicious intent and a financial intent. It's their job. And if you think an open source scanner or something is going to shore up all those holes, and it's not going to work. Good luck with that. Good luck with that.
Next slide.
Amen.
Next slide. I'm with you. Next slide. Hey, take us to the security part of DevOps. Take us to, you know what? Let's just keep going. What's the problem with traditional SDLC? It's a person. Every step of the way, a human being is going to try to slow you down. Next slide. Let's look at this from the next slide should be pretty good. And this is what DevOps is all about, really. DevOps is about when I write code and I'm done writing code, I can push it and have a bunch of scripts and automation and robots carry my code to production. And those robots, those scripts require significant sophistication. And so, but that's the dream here. Get people out of the way. Next slide.
God bless.
Some key principles here, right? I commit code and I go through an automated test suite. I go through peer review only in critical areas like authentication or crypto. I then build the entire the entire production infrastructure from scratch and push that live, and then do post deployment checks for scanning that takes a long time. Like in my experience, static analysis, I can run static analysis in a couple minutes if I use tools like semgrep or shift left or custom things that are made to be fast. That works well. But DAST, they're slow. So I tend to like to do my DAST scanning as a post-deployment check after I'm live, see what production looks like. And like third-party library scanning, I can do that as a blocker. So I'm just saying there's a collection of tools. And I know you got people involved. You have your own custom automation. So some of these scanners work well as a code commit blocker. Some of these scanners work well as post deployment. But if I get the initial automated test suite, if I pass that initial automated test suite for security, then I'm pretty much going live at that point. So what do you think? What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think committing, also looking at dependency security, you know, because you know, as we say, 80% of the code we're building, it hasn't been written by the developer, right? So include, you know, if you have all these includes, be it layer 7 JavaScript includes, or you know, some JavaScript framework or React or Angular or whatever the hell people are using these days, you know, all the way down to, you know, if it's container based, you know, the makeup of the container, are they using some sort of something with a CVE that wasn't there yesterday? We need to make sure that when we're building the production environment, when we're spinning it up and when we're building it, we need to make sure that we're not doing it with known issues, right?
Yep.
You know, I think SAST is very good, for particularly if you want to do incremental scanning. So you could do delta analysis scanning. So, you know, only do a SAST on the changed code, on the code that we haven't looked at before, which isn't a silver bullet, because the change code may not itself be vulnerable, but the change could make the whole system vulnerable, right? But that's the reality of life. And the second thing is what we do in terms of DAS there, you know, it's DAS scanning an application can take an age. The idea will be, again, it's to limit the scope of the DAS scan to the new piece of code, to the new feature, to the new function.
Hard.
Yeah.
Incremental DAS scanning is hard to get right.
It is hard to get right, yeah, and in order to do it, you need to understand what the change was and where it was on the branch of the production system, where in the production system, you know, and the other thing is, you know, if it's incremental DAS scanning with authentication or some form of authentication, etc. You know, there's a little bit of work to set up, but if you can get it going, you know, hopefully for a period afterwards, you won't have to, it will just work until something massively changes. Yeah.
And Owen, please forgive my sniffles. I got COVID. I got back from Portugal, but I'm like, a little sickness can't delay the necessity of talking about DevOps with you, Owen. So,
well, yeah, I think it's a very important thing, but I appreciate your time. I appreciate that you're here.
I love doing this with you. Next slide, please. Let's just charge on. This is where we care. This is where we're going to zoom in a little bit. The business wants to build it faster and cheaper. They don't want downtime, and they want security. And these are heavily competing forces, especially the idea of I want to build it faster and cheaper, but I don't want to get hacked. I don't. Fast and cheap is rarely the kind of words that I put onto secure software. It usually takes a lot of care. So these forces of what the business wants are competing. But luckily, for those of us who care about AppSec, the business talking about not getting hacked is becoming more important. Not through security, but we don't want to get compromised. Help us. So I think the drive for security is louder. We have to convince people less of its importance, and that makes me happy.
Oh, it's so loud. It's so much louder than it was before. You know, it's a board level conversation, because and why is that though? It's probably because legislation globally, you know, federal in the US, European, GDPR, all that stuff. You know, then you have all this industry legislation like payment card industry, DSS, whatever. All of it is saying if you have code that is weak, and you know you're not doing much to fix your stuff, you know, you can get your ass in trouble, or you can find heavily. You know, the thing is, everybody has vulnerabilities and everybody could possibly be hacked. But if you say, yeah, we got hacked, but we're using good, you know, salt and hash storage, and our architecture is secure, and we use SAST and we use DAST and we use pen testing, and look, we got hacked anyway. At least they're saying, okay, you're doing what's aligned with industry standards to try and not get hacked, right? But the fact is that every system has a weakness, as opposed to ignoring it. Like, it's sort of like, you know, if you look at the Formula One industry, the next race is in Miami this weekend. The first one in Miami ever. I think it's going to be exciting. But the thing is that there's no such thing as building a fast, cheap car, right? And everybody knows that, right? You can't build a car that does 300 kilometers an hour down the straight and keeps the driver safe, and it's cheap. Yeah. So why do we think we can build critical infrastructure of the internet fast and cheap? We just can't, right?
It's gambling, you know, especially in the startup world. People want to like get their stuff out, and you know, especially and when suddenly your software is popular or you have some success. Oh, let's go back and secure it. Yeah. Yeah, I've heard that. Next slide. Next slide. Get us out of here. Let's get to the meat. So, what Owen, this is all you, man. This is all you. Why don't you lead us out on this slide? Tell me what you see here.
Yeah. So the first thing is the perimeter is going away. That's so true. Like, you know, the idea of it's behind a firewall is gone. It's gone years ago. But it's still, you know, people, you know, firewalls are important still. But the idea of having something behind a firewall, exposure. People having exposed services. We do this thing, the vulnerability stats report. We do an exposure section on exposed stuff that shouldn't be exposed every year, and it's huge. The amount of stuff, huge. The amount of ransomware attacks and breaches based on just silly stuff being exposed. You know, it's completely mad, and it's not hard to fix. But look, if you have an enterprise and you don't have visibility, it's hard. If you don't know about it, it's hard, right? Traditional security mechanisms, yeah, 100%, right? Like using pen testing, traditional pen testing. How do you record metrics? A lot of DevOps is about recording metrics, improvement, trying to figure out, you know, where things are weak or where things are going wrong. You know, when your DevOps pipeline maybe breaks or something breaks, you know, that's okay, because the whole point of getting one of these things up and running is things will fail, right? Things will break. But the idea of using expensive consultants to do, you know, one pen test a year when you're deploying code every day, right? It's ridiculous.
That stopped being helpful a long time ago.
That's
BS.
That's stopping. Yeah, exactly. It is BS.
And every major standard that I think matters, like U.S. federal government, European standards, they don't talk about you need a quarterly pen test anymore. They talk about continuous monitoring of your software. That's been the drumbeat for years now, and so I think
with you. No, we do, but we're rehashing stuff like this. We have this stuff called ASM, Attack Surface Management, right? Like the fundamental part of ASM, apart from the DNS layer, you know, which is still, you know, it's not DNS ports, protocol, exposures. What have you got on the what's our attack surface? What have you got out on the public internet? That stuff is as old as Nmap, right? And how old is Nmap? Nmap's probably older than me. I don't know, maybe not. You know, it's old.
Next slide. Move along.
Yeah.
I got a lot of extra slides here. Now, this is DevSec. Oops, this is the way we don't want to do it. We don't want to talk about this. We don't want to put it in the review queue for most code. We don't want to wait for people to finish their security testing. No filing tickets. No changing your firewall rules before we go live. No personal security pro dashboard. No manual pen test before I go to production. All these things we want to get rid of so I can commit code, go through the gauntlet of security testing and automation. Going live, baby. And like
we're live.
These are all the things we want to stop doing.
Yeah, like I think it's fair, but we got to do something. You know,
go next slide. Go next slide. Here's the point of DevOps. Yeah, it's a process of incorporating and enforcing meaningful security controls without slowing down my ability to deploy code. This is Jimmy Mesta's definition from KSOC. Next slide. And so we got, again, all three have got to be integrated into how DevOps works. Development, operations, and security all needs to be first-class citizens. Next slide. I want to get to the gold. Yeah. It's a journey, Owen. Do you feel the fly? I feel it. I feel the fly.
I'm getting there. I'm still on the walk, but in maybe a few years' time, I'll be on the fly. I'm thinking, you know, I'm never happy. Walk's good enough for me right now. I'm walking here.
Next slide. Get me out of here. So next slide. There we go. So I know we've hit on this slide a couple times, but the code commit's important. The automated security test suite's important. The build automation of your infrastructure automation's important. And realizing that some types of scanning are going to take too long to run, that we do that post-deployment. There's a lot of other details in the pipeline, but this is the major theory where, and I've seen this in play in a lot of big organizations with great success. And so I am a believer in this, Owen. The devil's in the details, but I'm a big believer that this is the modern way to do software.
I agree with you, but I still believe that if you just follow this model, which is great, you know, if you can achieve this, congratulations. You still need to at the far side, at the production side, if not before, if speed is that important to you, you still need to check for the right vulnerabilities, right? You still need to check for things like, as we discussed already, access control vulnerabilities. You have to fit that in somewhere. You can't say it doesn't fit my DevOps model, because hackers don't give a shit if it fits your DevOps model, right? Hackers don't give a shit. And the fact is that, you know, maybe it's not sexy to have a clunky access control test done at some point, or, you know, a business logic, some testing, or just some pen testing done. You need it done somewhere, because if you don't, somebody else will.
So here's a question from Julian Heineth, who's on the webinar with us. He's like, what are some examples of post-deployment check softwares that are commonly used? Here's an example, Julian. Just in general, the DAS scanning technology that you get in a tool, they take a long time to run. And like Owen's team at EdScan, they're going to do like incremental scans to make it a lot faster. But traditionally, when I'm running a scanner that's sending attack traffic to your website, those tend to be slow. And when I want to do code commit security, like a developer is issuing a PR, I want to finish my automated test suite in like 60 to 120 seconds and be out. And I typically can't run traditional DAS, dynamic scanning. Like I typically can't run that in under a couple minutes. And so for another example is, if you look at code scanner, SAST, there's a tool called SemGrep that's open source that runs in like a minute or two, where a traditional scanner like Fortify runs in like 4 to 8 hours. So I like to run a lightweight static analysis scanner at check-in time to block the check-in. And then I'll run like a traditional static analysis engine after it's gone live and let that thing run for hours. Just think of it this way, Julian. In the world of security tooling, there's static analysis, dynamic analysis, IAST, integrated analysis, and excuse me, and software composition analysis. Some of these run fast, do that at the code commit level. Some of these run slow, do that post-production.
Yeah, so post deployment, after we deploy, right? Like, you know what? If there was anything I'd ask somebody to look at, it's to look at some combination of simple vulnerability management, full stack. I don't get caught up in the term vulnerability management, because, you know, a lot of the Gartners, the IDCs, the Forresters refer to that as network security. I mean, application vulnerability management, covering off the host layer, covering off, you know, across your entire span of your IP range, but also visibility, ASM.
Yes.
What we're finding is that people are deploying stuff and forgetting about it, and you find, you know, over time, maybe they pre-deployed something, a pre-production environment, opened it up for some reason, you know, and never torn it down again. And like, it's like these exposed, these exposed AWS buckets and stuff. There's a lot to be said for just having simple things like visibility. If you know what you have out there, at least you'll know what good looks like. But visibility is super important. So, combination of automated vulnerability discovery and some sort of ASM or visibility, I think, is super important. You know, and then if you do find systems that are weak or brittle, you may need to go further in and do some penetration testing post production. But a lot of the stuff Jim says, I totally agree with. You can't get a pen test in the middle of a build pipeline. It doesn't work. It's keep humans away. Keep humans away from the middle of it. Yeah.
But you can still use humans to do important things out of the DevOps lifecycle and still integrate those results into your pipeline result system, whatever that is. So we still need the people. We just got to apply them apply them properly so we don't get in the way of this automated live delivery.
There's one thing as well, Jim, defining levels of rigor in testing depending on the criticality of the system you're building, right?
Well said.
So if it's a super critical transactional application, or it's a new feature for a critical business application, you may have to, have a different rule set in your DevOps pipeline, look for different things. We've got clients, in North America, in the media world, and they're obsessed with cryptography because they stream movies, they stream. So cryptography is super important to them. Where if you look at a banking organization, they're probably more worried with sort of typical injection attacks and theft as opposed to So you need to tune what you're looking for as well, depending on what the context is. I think that's important.
Zane Lackey, who was one of the early Etsy DevOps pioneers, he told me all of our e-commerce and typical content pages, that's all DevOps. A dev can go in, check in code, and it goes live if it passes the gauntlet. But our credit card vault that runs our company, no way. Every single one of those check-ins must be peer reviewed by 2 of our approved cryptographers, and then it goes live. So sometimes you don't want to push the most, I think authentication code and crypto code. I really want that reviewed by a human. Automation doesn't do as great. So and that's a small percentage of your code base. So there's a little nuance on the same topic of what you're talking about. Good. Next slide. Let's go next slide. Let's get to
the juice. Yeah.
So one of the pieces we haven't talked about yet is before I'm even allowed to commit some work I'm doing, I can still do a pre-commit hook. What that means is I'll run things like a secret discovery scanner looking for hard-coded secrets before I commit that. Because once I commit it, that secret is in GitHub or similar. So I really want to eliminate hard-coded secrets before we allow a PR. So this is an example of a scanner that I can run before I'm even allowed to do a commit.
In the 90s, Jim, when I was a developer, we used to use a thing called check style. And we used to set it up to look for hard-coded passwords, hard-coded keys. Because it's just a grep. It's a grep tool for code, right? Pretty much. But it just shows you 30 years later, we're still dealing with it.
Check style was last published April 24th of this year, version 10.2. So
April 24th.
All these years, it's still cranking after
it's
all.
It's still there, baby. It's still got some use somewhere. That's great to hear.
Just like you and me, we're old too, but we still got some use. We still got some use.
Yeah, indeed.
Next slide. So that's the idea of a pre-commit hook. This is now the main commit stage. I am now done with my work and I'm committing it. So I want to run at least third-party library scanning, static analysis, security testing that runs fast. At under 60 seconds, under 120 seconds, because developers are in their daily workflow, checking in code. I want incremental scans, so it's fast. I like tools like SemGrep because of their speed and it's open source. I mean, it's not open source, it's free. But the idea is, what can I do in a 120 to 60 second window to make sure the check-in from the developer does not have obvious security bugs? This is one of the most important touch points in a DevOps pipeline. Boom.
Amen.
Next slide. We're winding down here, folks. Now here's an acceptance stage, right? This is where I have a successful commit. All the security testing has passed. I'm now building the infrastructure from scratch, right? I'm like setting up my config, building my containers from scratch, getting my cloud setup done from scratch. And I've known good environments I can use to like golden images to get this started. And now I'm building the infrastructure and I'm going to start kicking off some security checks now. Now, these different scans are probably not going to finish in this phase, but I'm kicking them off because I know they're going to take a while. And if they catch something early, that's great. But this is the idea where I'm deploying at this point. Let's go next slide. There's some more interesting stuff here. So now I'm in production, right? The infrastructure's been pushed. we want to closely monitor this. It's all programmable infrastructure, basic stuff. Go next slide. One more next slide. Now that we're solidly in production, what did we pass so far? We passed the commit stage and passed those batteries of rapid scanning. We've passed the infrastructure stage. We were able to dynamically build out the infrastructure and push it live with the code. We are now solid and live. And now all of these slow scans that we can't do in a DevOps lifecycle is now, we now do those out of the cycle. We're live, we're done. And now, boom, the long form dynamic scanning, long form static analysis, manual testing against access control and similar kicks off here. And as soon as we note any problem, we can alert the team. So like, it's not that we're not doing thorough testing. We're just not letting it get in the way of production. And because we can push features fast, if we make a mistake, we can fix the security bugs fast. The idea is not to eliminate security bugs, but to close the window of their exposure by this rapid deployment capability.
Good.
So Daniel, is there a framework you could recommend that will help translate an org's more general security standards to an automated security stack with the pipeline? Daniel, I don't know what you mean by a framework. I can tell you, like, in the open source world, I like the Defect Dojo as a DevOps pipeline. They integrate with EdgeScan and similar type of tools, right? But if you want like a framework or an open source tool, a lot of people were using Jenkins at the beginning of the DevOps lifecycle. I wouldn't touch Jenkins anymore. People who have moved to GitHub use GitHub Actions and GitHub Automation. That's great. If you want to run your own server, I would look at, in the DevOps world, Defect Dojo, an open source, very comprehensive DevOps platform for this kind of work. You also have EdgeScan with integration into, with their API. You can use EdgeScan to integrate into any of these DevOps frameworks out there today. Boom.
Jim, I think OWASP has the OWASP DevOps, the
Defect
DevOps.
Dojo.
Yeah, but they also DevOps maturity model, the DevOps maturity model. It's like sort of like OpenSAM, but it's for DevOps. And I'm not sure how mature that project is. I think there is a DevOps maturity model project in OWASP. Again, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now.
Any good? Do you use it? I've never used it. So
I only give maturity models so much, like, I only give maturity models so much weight in general, but I'm looking.
I know what you mean. Yeah,
I'm looking at this right now.
It could be a good place to start, to get a sort of a little bit of a roadmap going. But who knows? It's open source, and I don't know how mature the project is. So,
I would not call it super mature. I'm not seeing like.
It's still a laboratory project. It's a lab. It's not a flagship.
But it's a good idea. There's others out there that are doing it. Maturity one. Okay, let's see. Maturity one, dynamic death infrastructure, consolidation, test intensity. I'm having trouble parsing this easily.
No worries. Let's move on. It's okay. But yeah,
they're out there. Yeah, actually, you know what? If you go to this URL, it gets better. This is where I'm looking at. If you see under, and now it is reasonable maturity model. A lot of the things we're just talking about here, a lot of the details we've been talking about.
Right.
So there's a maturity model for you. It is decent. I like it.
Yeah. Good.
Bring us home, Owen. Bring us
metrics.
home. I think we're winding down. Bring us home.
I think we are. That's a nice dashboard. I wonder who makes that one. But I think that's something that's really keen about cybersecurity in general, and DevOps is the ability to get metrics. And metrics can mean lots of things, but in the DevOps world, it alludes to a lot of the stuff you mentioned, Jim, like speed, like how many vulnerabilities, like managing the rule sets, and as you apply different rule sets, how does that change in terms of speed and metrics? Because you can't test for everything if speed is an issue, but then again, you may not want to. but you also need to maintain the rule set or maintain the tuning, because it could be a new log4j issue, right? Comes out, and something similar to that, and therefore, in your DevOps environments, you may want to test for that, or at least include it into your rule set. So, it's pretty important to track metrics, and things like Defect Dojo, or a lot of the open source sort of consumers of metrics, I think are super important, because something we're very bad at doing traditionally is measuring stuff in security.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think?
No, I think you've had no choice but to make your metric evaluation mature, right? The amount of scanning and assessment you do for your customers is intense, right? You're a continuous monitoring service. That's a lot of data. You got to do something with it, and your customers demand that you have good visibility into all these metrics. So just by virtue of what you do and what your customers have demanded from you, I've seen your dashboards. They're extraordinarily mature. And that's a combination of like your own building, your own instincts, but just, I know your customers, they're a significant customer list, and I know they're demanding. So
a little bit.
No, in a good way, but I like smart, demanding customers to help me mature my capability.
And so much.
No, your dashboards are extraordinarily mature, and it shows. Like your company's been around for a while now, so I'm a big fan.
Thanks, man. So that's it. Is that everything? Is that the last slide? No, monitoring. We just talked about it, right?
Next slide. Next slide.
Visibility.
Yeah. Wrap it up. Next slide. Yep. Your DevOps tooling itself can be a source of attack. So make sure your pipeline is locked down and managed.
You know what? That's super important.
Yeah.
And you know what? I'll tell you why. We have a new threat intel feature on EdgeScan as of April, and it maps your vulnerabilities to the CISA exploitability catalog, which is a catalog. If you Google CISA, CISA exploitability catalog, it has a list of vulnerabilities that they see are being used by threat actors to exploit businesses and organizations. And you'll see there's an awful lot of issues there in relation to Jenkins and various sort of code building frameworks and tools, which are being used to exploit businesses. So people, like, sometimes you see these things exposed, but even if the attacker can break in past your perimeter, so some of these tools are not built to be secure. They are irony of it, huh? But some of these DevOps tools are really the actual threat model of building these tools. People didn't think that these tools themselves would be attacked, I'm guessing, right? Oh, yeah. But it is really important. Yeah.
Oh, they do. There's been like a lot of the early DevOps groups were doing Jenkins, and that thing has had more critical, major
tons. Yeah. Tons of stuff. Amen. Yeah. What else? Elasticsearch, Jenkins, Manage Engine, WebLogic, a VMware vCenter, all that stuff is, we found actually in the last month, which all is all exposed to exploit. It's also been actively exploited in the wild. So if you are building your and the other thing we're finding as well in terms of ASM is we're finding people leaving the stuff on. I don't know how. It's probably this poor firewall config or something, but we see these systems being exposed to the internet. So, it's not unheard of that we find Jenkins servers exposed to the public internet.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I know, but you find it. It's so odd.
That's crazy.
It's a bit we do like our clients get alerted in seconds, and hopefully they close the stuff in seconds. But how does it happen in the first place is the question I like to ask sometimes, but yeah.
Well, for the 23 of you left, thank you for being here on our webinar. By the way, I got the COVID. Owen's sick. This is a little bit of a sniffly webinar, but I still hope you found some value in listening to our thoughts on DevOps and what it is. And
yeah,
Owen, it's always a pleasure doing this with you. Anytime.
Yeah, and I'll see you in June in San Francisco, hopefully. And anybody else that's on the call or on the previous webinars, if they're going to RSA, please pop by our booth or we meet you in some bar somewhere, whatever. It's all good.
And if, again, I'm a big fan of EdgeScan. If you have questions about EdgeScan, just email Owen directly, right? You don't need to go through, he's owen@edgescan.com. So don't go through sales, just talk to Owen directly. He'll give you personal service.
Yeah, no worries.
Is that your email address? I get that right? Owen@edgescan.com.
It is. Yeah, it's probably going to be on every dodgy spam list now. But
all right, I'm done. I'm going to bed. I'm going back to bed. Owen, I salute you. My best to you and the whole EdgeScan team. I'll see you next show, Owen.
Yeah, I'll talk to you soon. Bye. Take care,
All
guys.
right, take care, all. Thank you.